Good morning. My name is Bruce Nustad. I'm president of the TwinWest's Chamber of Commerce, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's premier 3rd Congressional District debate. Members of the media, members of the community, TwinWest and business community members, campaign members, elected officials, and distinguished guests, we welcome you here today. TwinWest, as you may know, is an involved, innovative, and influential regional chamber of commerce representing 10 communities in the western and northwestern suburbs of the Twin Cities and surrounding areas. With 1,000 members, TwinWest prides itself on providing access to an influential and informed business community. Focused on key business issues, TwinWest sets a priority on providing members of the business community an opportunity to be heard by elected and appointed officials at the local, federal, and state level. Today's debate offers you one of those opportunities as a first glimpse of the candidates vying for the 3rd Congressional District. Debate together and answer questions pertinent to the business community and community at large. Please join me today in a special welcome to former Minnesota Governor Al Quie. Former Governor, where are you? Thank you. Governor Quie was kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule as chair as Minnesotans for Impartial Courts to join us this morning. We appreciate that. I also welcome all other elected and appointed officials, including city council members, members of the state legislature, and above. At this time, out of respect for the speakers, I'd like to invite you to take out your electronic device, your cell phone or other electronic device, and set it to vibrate, or even more importantly, maybe turn it off. And I'd now like to introduce our host for today's event. Mr. Lee Anderson is Manager of State and Local Government Relations for General Mills. At General Mills, Lee advocates the company's interests during the formation of public policy. He manages state and local lobbying efforts and implements grassroots and public affairs efforts throughout the company. Please join me this morning in welcoming our host, Mr. Lee Anderson.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to General Mills. We're thrilled to be hosting this debate this morning. General Mills has a long history of involvement in our community, including our employees to be active in politics and to vote and to participate in events like this. So thank you to the General Mills employees that are attending today as well. Thank you to TwinWest for your leadership in organizing this debate, as always, setting the standard and leading the way. We're thrilled to be hosting everyone today. Now I'd like to introduce Dannette Coleman, who will be our moderator throughout the debate this morning. Dannette is Vice President of Public Policy and Government Relations at Medica. She is responsible for overseeing the development and execution of Medica's public policy agenda, working closely with the Minnesota legislature and other government officials. Dannette serves on the TwinWest Board of Directors, and she is also the chair of the TwinWest Government Affairs Committee. Please join me in welcoming Dannette Coleman.
Thank you, Lee. Good morning, everyone. I am very excited to be here today serving as the moderator for the very first 3rd Congressional debate hosted here today by TwinWest. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this event. Our presenting sponsor this morning is Medica. Medica is a nonprofit health plan headquartered in Minnetonka that provides coverage to more than 1.4 million members. Medica offers employer-sponsored and individual plans, as well as Medicare and Medicaid plans. Our newest individual plan being announced today, ironically, is Medica Encore, the first product in the market designed for individuals ages 50 to 64. The advocating sponsors today include Politics in Minnesota, Legal Ledger, Capital Report, and Excel Energy. And the supporting sponsors are General Mills and Comcast. Thank you very much to our sponsors whose support helps bring us this event. At this time, I am going to invite the candidates to come out and take a seat. So if you want to come out here. With Jim Ramstad. With Jim Ramstad retiring, voters in the 3rd Congressional District will elect a new member of Congress for the first time in 18 years. The Washington Post and National Journal rank the race as one of the top House races in the country, and certainly this race is very important to Minnesota businesses. Now let me go ahead and introduce the candidates. On the far right, David Dillon, the endorsed Independence Party candidate, is a successful entrepreneur, CEO, and owner of the Myers Printing Company in Brooklyn Park. He is a student of history and economics and is active in community affairs. David is also a pilot, Excelsior area resident, graduate of the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Business, husband of 32 years to wife Kathy, and proud father of Katie, Michael, and Sarah. I apologize, Kathy. David, thank you for participating today. Ashwin Madia, the endorsed DFL candidate, was born in Boston and grew up in Plymouth, Minnesota. He attended Osseo Senior High School, the University of Minnesota, and earned a law degree from New York University. Ashwin is a former captain in the U.S. Marine Corps who served in Iraq and worked to build the new Iraqi legal system. After finishing active duty, he returned to Minnesota and worked as an attorney specializing in business matters and intellectual properties. Thank you, Ashwin, for being here today. Representative Erik Paulsen, the endorsed Republican candidate, was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives in 1994, serving Edina and Eden Prairie residents, whom he continues to serve today as his constituents. At the state capitol, Erik's colleagues elected him to several leadership roles, including House Majority Leader. He currently serves on the Ways and Means, Taxes, Commerce, and Rules committees. Erik works as a business analyst for one of Minnesota's top employers, Target Corporation. Erik and his wife Kelly live in Eden Prairie with their 4 daughters, Cassie, Brianna, Taylor, and Liesel. Erik, thank you so much for being here today. Our debate this morning will focus on business-related issues. Business leaders and members of the community have submitted the questions in advance. All candidates have been briefed on the rules governing today's election. We're not electing anyone today. Debate. But this would be a great group, I'm sure, to do it. Candidates will have 3 minutes each to give their opening remarks. I will then pose questions in rotating order in which each candidate will be given 2 minutes for their response. A candidate may request a 1-minute rebuttal if he feels his position has been misstated by one of the other candidates. This is not an opportunity to simply request more time on a question. Though I do not anticipate having to do so, I will cut off any candidate that engages in personal attacks or dialogue that focuses on non-topic related remarks. Each candidate at the end will have 3 minutes to offer closing remarks as well. Jana Reno, TwinWest's staff here in the front, will be our official timekeeper for today. And that brings us to the candidates' opening remarks. David, we'll start with you, followed by Ashwin, and then Erik.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for being here. So many don't participate now in politics, so I appreciate that you'd be here or that you'd watch on TV. A little bit of my background was shared, so I come here as a father, as a husband, as a CEO and an entrepreneur, but somebody whose political journey started years ago in a DFL household. And so as politics is tribal, I was a Democrat. I went to the University of Minnesota and studied economics, and it became difficult for me to continue to say that I was a Democrat. My political evolution continued, and I arrived at a point a number of years ago where, although I had been calling myself a Republican, I began to look anew at politics, public policy, the economy, through the eyes of my children, who were then all college-bound. And I began to see a picture that was made up of 2 locked parties who could not stop fighting. When the election was over, the fight continued. And the net effect was that there was essentially no progress. Today we'll talk about Social Security, but we won't talk about the years, we'll talk about the decades of lack of progress. And so too on health care, and so too on energy policy. Over and over and over again, I'm going to point out today a theme in which we talk about how progress can't happen in Washington because of the locked battle between the red guys and the blue guys. So I think we must change, and I'll argue for positions that are from both the left and the right, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you all very much for being here this morning, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this. It is my honor and my privilege to speak to the TwinWest's Chamber, which I know is one of the most active chambers in the entire state of Minnesota. I particularly appreciate the work that you do on behalf of small businesses and sticking up for small businesses, which I believe are the lifeblood of this economy. And if I'm given the honor of representing this district, I'd like to continue in Congressman Ramstad's tradition of working closely with the Chamber to create a pro-business climate around the Twin Cities. So thank you for all that you do. As many of you know, my name is Ashwin Madia. I'm running for the U.S. Congress because I think we have the greatest country in the entire world, and I think that we can do so much better than what we've been doing over the last several years. We just need the courage to change. I was born in Boston to the son of Indian immigrants. We moved all around the country as I was growing up and came to Minnesota when I was in high school. I went to Osseo Senior High and the University of Minnesota, and then I went to law school. After law school, I joined the U.S. Marine Corps. I served as a Marine Corps officer for 4 years, and I deployed to Iraq in 2005 and 2006. While I was there, I had the chance to work with some of the bravest people I've ever met in my entire life. Brave Marines and brave soldiers, but also brave Iraqis that risk their lives every single day just to come to work. And I got a chance to see bravery not just in words, but bravery in action. And I think we need more of that in Washington today. Not just politicians making speeches, but leaders that have the courage to change and the courage to lead and the willingness, as Ramstad did, to bring people from both sides together to chart a new direction for our country. I believe that we need a new direction when it comes to our economy. I think that we need to balance our federal budget and restore fiscal responsibility to our country. I think we need to invest in our people. That includes from early childhood education all the way through lifelong education to ensure that we have the most competitive workforce in the entire world. And I think we need a new way of doing energy. I think we need a comprehensive energy strategy that will get rid of our dependence on foreign oil once and for all. I also believe that we need a new direction when it comes to our foreign policy. We can fight and win this war on terror, but we must do it in a smart and targeted way, and in a way that's consistent with our ideals as Americans. I want you to know how optimistic I am about our country right now. We have such an opportunity here to come together as Americans and to write our country's course. As business leaders of our community, you know that when there's an opportunity, you take it. And that's what we have here right now, an opportunity to come together and to write our nation's course. All we need is the courage to change. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our discussion this morning.
Well, I also want to thank the TwinWest's Chamber for all you do to create jobs, to keep our business climate healthy, and really to boost the quality of life for all the people in our community. And also want to thank General Mills for hosting this debate this morning. You know, with just a 9% approval rating, Congress is broken. Many of us know that, I believe. I'm running now for Congress to help fix it. Here in Minnesota, jobs are scarce, energy prices and gas prices are way too high, and health care costs keep going up. And yet, it's true, partisan politics continue to dominate Washington, and they're not solving the problems in Congress that are facing many Minnesota businesses and many Minnesota families. We need new vision, we need new energy, and we need forward-thinking leaders in Congress that are going to address these issues. The 3rd District has long been represented by good public servants like Jim Ramstad and Bill Frenzel, folks who are supporting me in my campaign now who have worked in a bipartisan, collaborative manner. As a state representative, I've worked in that tradition, getting things done across party lines in the legislature. I will take that commitment to Congress. As someone who works in business, I understand the importance of good planning, good management, good decision-making, and the value of customer service. Those are principles that we need in Congress. I want to transfer those lessons now to Congress. Protecting economic vitality and competing globally is a hallmark of the 3rd Congressional District. And yet Congress, in this hyper-competitive economy, is thinking of raising tax burdens. That would be a tremendous mistake, especially on small business providers that provide over 70% of the jobs in our country. Our economy needs an educated workforce to prepare for the high-quality jobs of the future. That's why in the legislature I've worked on bringing Mandarin language Chinese programs to Minnesota schools, creating an India Center at the University of Minnesota, looking to the future. We also need to Americanize our energy and have an energy policy that produces American energy for American jobs and eliminates our dependence on foreign oil. And high health care costs continue to take a large chunk out of the pocketbooks of seniors, of families, and of small businesses. Finally, Congress needs to get its fiscal house in order. It's absolutely true the deficit continues to grow, the federal budget deficit is spinning out of control, and we're spending irresponsible amounts of money that now the federal debt is held by countries in other parts of the world. We need a constitutional amendment to require a balanced budget, just like the state of Minnesota has to balance its budget. We need a line and a veto to address pork barrel spending. We need to eliminate abusive earmarks. We live in the best country in the world, without a doubt. And by resisting short-term fixes and embracing long-term solutions, we can set a new direction for Congress and for our country. Above all, I share the dream that all 3rd District families have, that my four daughters are going to grow up in a world that is safer, that is cleaner, that is healthier, and that is more prosperous, so that they have the same opportunities and choices that previous generations have had. Thank you very much. I look forward to our discussion this morning.
Thank you. All right, well, that leads us to our first question. This question, we will start with Ashwin Madia, followed by Erik Paulsen and David Dillon. The first question is on the topic of health care. I'm the moderator, so I got to pick the order. Minnesota is a national leader on health care. We have the lowest uninsured rate in the country and continually rank as the 1st or 2nd healthiest state in the nation. However, Minnesota families and businesses are not insulated from the horrific increases in the cost of health care. This is resulting in a higher number of uninsured in Minnesota and throughout the country. This issue is one of TwinWest's top priorities. Proposals aimed at addressing our healthcare system often focus only on the financing aspect rather than addressing the fact that our system costs too much. Sure. What ideas do you have to slow the rising costs of healthcare to make it easier for businesses to help their employees meet their healthcare needs?
Thank you for the question. I think that healthcare is one of the #1 concerns in this district right now, not just for families. You know, I've had the opportunity over the past year to talk to many different families across the district, and healthcare is just not affordable right now, as you mentioned. The average premium cost for a family of 4 is $1,200 a month for healthcare, and that's just not affordable. Additionally, it's hurting small businesses. I've talked to many small business owners over the past several months, and it is killing small businesses right now. That is the #1 concern that they all mentioned to me. Clearly something needs to be done. So here are the specific ideas that I have on that. First, it's important to recognize that there's some things about healthcare that we do well in this country. We have great quality of care in this country. If someone anywhere in the world gets sick, where do they want to go? They want to go to the Mayo Clinic, right? We need to preserve the quality of care that we have in this country as we make changes. Second, we have choice in this country. That is a uniquely American ideal, and that's why our system will never be like a European system. We must ensure that people always have the right to choose their doctors and their hospitals. The things we can do better are affordability and access. So specifically, here's what I do. First, we need to increase preventative care in this country to identify and treat illnesses very early on when it's much cheaper than if we wait until later on. Second, we need to increase the amount of electronic billing in this country, electronic record keeping. That'll decrease costs. Third, we can decrease administration and bureaucracy. Fourth, increase in-home hospice care at the end of life. That will also decrease costs. And finally, every small business that I know negotiates with their supplier. We ought to let the government negotiate with pharmaceutical drug companies on drug prices. That will also help bring costs down. If we do these things, I think we can, one, maintain quality and choice in this country, while at the same time improving affordability and access for working class Americans.
Thank you, Erik.
Well, one of the reasons that we have such a high number of folks in this country that are uninsured is because health care expenses are too expensive. It's just too high of a cost, without a doubt. Here in Minnesota, we have the lowest uninsured rate in the country. So we have a model that we can embrace and put forward as we've put forward in the state legislature. We can embrace many of these concepts at a national level. 180 million Americans right now get their health insurance through corporations like General Mills, for instance. But the small business community does not have that same capability. They're not able to take deductions. Individuals can't take deductions at the same level that corporations can. We need to have those similar deductions so small businesses and individuals can get into the marketplace and can get health insurance provided for them. We also need small business health care plans that are allowed to pool together, to use their resources so that they compete on a broader market-based scale. And we also need tax incentives so that individuals and folks can have, whether it's vouchers or tax credits, to put more responsibility to individual choice and individual care so that folks can make decisions about where they're going to go for their health insurance and take that out of pocket directly. We also need to make sure, I believe, to have more competition in the marketplace. I think you should be able to buy health insurance across state lines, just like you can buy your auto insurance across state lines right now. We're in a previous century right now in terms of our health care policy and where we're allowing competition, and that's a needed change. Healthcare savings accounts are a tremendous opportunity, and many small businesses and folks represented in this room take advantage of that right now. We need to enhance and expand those even more. We also need medical liability reform and tort reform. That's going to help bring down costs as well. You know, our entire healthcare system, bottom line though, needs to move in the direction of reimbursing under a different scenario. We're reimbursing for rewarding doctors and patients for preventative care, for chronic disease control. So we're not just providing more tasks and more opportunities where we're focusing more on quality and outcomes rather than just on the number of procedures. That's how we will save a tremendous amount of money in our healthcare system.
Thank you very much. And David?
A number of good ideas already presented to this group. Specifically, I would add to that it's important that Americans be able to buy their pharmaceuticals outside of the United States. That's something that Congress could fix. Also, Ashwin, earlier you spoke of courage. I'd ask you, particularly in the Democratic Party, to buck the trial lawyers and acknowledge that there is a substantial portion of health care costs today that comes directly from insurance costs that we all bear from lawsuits that are often not meritorious at all. Finally, I would ask you to go beyond the idea of being able to buy insurance across state lines and take a look at the fact that there's 50 sets of regulation today in healthcare. There's the Minnesota version, there's the Idaho version. If you want to distribute pharmaceuticals in Florida, the rules are not the same as if you want to do that in Nebraska. So this is a cost we all bear in two ways. First, there's the overhead cost of maintaining a system with 50 sets of regulations on everything, pharmaceuticals, insurance. Beyond that, when we experienced a 70% increase in our healthcare cost last year, we turned and could not buy from a large pool of suppliers because it's regulated. And it should be harmonized with a single federal system where we can buy across state lines.
May I have a minute to respond?
Yes.
Okay.
1 minute rebuttal.
Okay. You know, one of the problems I think that there's been in the entire discussion on healthcare reform in this country is that there's always a boogeyman, right? There's always somebody that we want to point the finger at. Either some people in my party point at pharmaceutical companies, sometimes it goes to insurance companies, and some people point to the trial lawyers and they say, well, if you just fix that, that'll fix everything. I don't think that's true. And I think that if we want to move forward on this discussion and achieve real and lasting healthcare reform in this country, then we need to work with all sides in order to get things done, and we can't pretend it's as simple as targeting one particular group of people. Are there bad lawsuits? Sure. Are there bad lawyers? Sure. Guess what? Those bad lawsuits get thrown out of court, and those lawyers get sanctions put on them, as well they should. But in the end, I think we're going to need to have a comprehensive solution where we work with all parties, not trying to demonize any one particular group.
All right, we are going to move on to our next question, which is on the issue of trade. Erik, we're going to have you start out responding to this, followed by David and then Ashwin. The U.S. continues to be a leader in global trade. Progress was made to advance trade agreements that work in favor of U.S. businesses and consumers by opening up new markets in Peru, Panama, Colombia, and South Korea. Specifically, the Colombian trade agreement has been sent to Congress, but congressional leadership has failed to schedule a vote. What is your position on trade expansion, and specifically, do you support the proposed trade agreement with Colombia?
First of all, I think it's important for folks to know that 90% of the consumer market in this world is outside of the United States. There's tremendous opportunity for our Minnesota businesses and our jobs climate to grow here in this country if we embrace free trade. I'm a student of Jim Ramstad and Bill Frenzel, who have talked about the need to go down the road for NAFTA and other free trade agreements for a long period of time. It's enhanced and grown jobs in this country. And without a doubt, we have to continue in that track. It helps the agricultural community in our state. It helps jobs in the technology area. And it helps our manufacturing exporters that are putting more quality on the amount of their exports rather than just giving up simple manufacturing techniques to China or to India or to other areas of the world. Right now, we do have a Democratic Congress that is basically too protectionist. They've given up the opportunity to embrace a Colombian free trade agreement, a Korean free trade agreement, and the opportunity for the president to negotiate those agreements, no matter who that president is in either party, to negotiate them without amendment. I think it is absolutely critical that we remove that protectionist environment and we allow that to move forward. I strongly support the Colombian free trade agreement. It's only going to help this country, it's going to help this state, it's going to help our district, because right now it's a win-win. We're paying a 35% tariff on average to put our products into Colombia. Right now, Colombia's not putting any tariff. We're not putting any tariffs on Colombian products coming our direction. It's a win-win, and so we have to, I think, remove the mentality of protectionism and union control that we have in the Democratic Congress right now, and we will make progress, and we have to do that for our third district businesses.
David?
I strongly support free trade. I specifically support the Colombian trade agreement. It's really almost unconscionable that a country like Colombia that has done as much as it has done to progress democratically and fight the good fight against the drug lords, that we would not support. Erik's quite right. A Democratic Congress has not supported this free trade agreement. He's quite right that it's a huge benefit for the 3rd Congressional District. Our companies involved in exports, we understand just exactly how important it is to have free trade. It creates jobs here. What he didn't point out was that the reason the Democratic Congress is not supporting free trade is so they can stick it to the current president. This is not a considered opinion of the individuals involved. It's part of the food fight. They're not supporting that so that they can stop the other guy. It's a put a stick in his spokes move. Free trade is important.
Ashwin?
Okay. I don't know about the motivations of the Democratic Congress, but I'll tell you what I think about free trade. I support free trade. I think that the world has changed over the last 10 to 15 years. Now with the pace that goods and communications move, we live in a global economy, and there are huge opportunities out there for our products, both in China, in India, and all across the world. We need to take advantage of this free trade and make sure that we have the most competitive economy in the entire world. However, in the midst of this free trade, I think government has a role to play in making sure that our nation and our businesses are competing on a level playing field with other nations and other businesses. Here's how specifically I think we can do it. First, let's make sure that other countries' markets are as open to our products as our markets are to theirs. Second, let's make sure that the trade agreements we sign, including the one that we're talking about here, include labor, environmental, and intellectual property standards, so that other companies are competing on the same other nations' companies are competing on the same level playing field as our companies are. And third, and this is a difference I have, I think, with both the candidates here, invest in our people. If we want to be competitive in this new global economy, we must have the most educated and well-trained workforce on the face of the planet. That means early childhood education, K through 12 education. It means making college more affordable and higher education more affordable. It also means lifelong job training, lifelong education, to ensure that our workers always have the tools they need to compete in this new global economy. If we do these things, if we open other countries' markets to our products, if we make sure our trade agreements have labor, environmental, and intellectual property standards, and if we invest in our people, I think we'll have a strategy to win. Our workers can compete with anyone in the entire world, provided we've got a level playing field.
All right, thank you. If
Can I
it's on the
rebuttal?
education issue, we've got a whole question on that.
Well, it's just a little, rebuttal.
Okay.
I just want to rebut because
1 minute.
Ashwin had mentioned that it's a difference from the two other candidates, and I absolutely believe we need to invest in our workforce for the high-quality jobs of the future. That's why in the legislature, I moved forward and advocated for legislation that would allow our students to travel abroad on study abroad grants. I did that with Senator Poggemiller on the other side of the aisle. That's the type of effort we need at Washington, is working on a bipartisan basis. I also sponsored legislation for lifelong learning accounts, authored that legislation with the Speaker of the House, so that people, as they go through job transitions, the average person now is going to have many different jobs, up to 14 to 17 different jobs throughout their career. Those are the types of lifelong learning opportunities that I want to bring to Congress as well. And so absolutely, those are opportunities. I support that. My wife, Kelly, was the chair of the Education Council Advisory Committee in Eden Prairie. So I've had 4 daughters go through ECFE classes. I strongly believe we have to have lifelong learning, starting from the earliest childhood levels all the way through lifelong learning after college.
Thank you. Our next question we're going to move to is on the topic of energy. David, we will start this with you, followed by Ashwin, and Erik, you'll close us up on that. The United States is seeking opportunities to reduce dependence on foreign oil. Congress has made recent commitments to invest in new technologies to complement our existing oil and coal-based energy infrastructure. What are your views on national energy policy, and how would you expand our domestic resources, including on such issues as oil, gas, renewables, or nuclear, to meet our nation's rising energy needs? And if you could also squeeze into your question whether or not you support the lifting the current restrictions on offshore drilling. David, we'll start with you.
To have a sensible discussion about energy policy, you really have to stop and talk about environment first. The issue is global climate risk. There are some who take the position on the far right that it can't happen. It isn't happening, it won't happen. And if it does happen, it won't be humans that did it. For those folks, energy policy is quite simple. You dig up the coal and burn it. But if you recognize the reality of global climate risk, energy policy is different. The reality is there is global climate risk. The models, the best models that talk about climate risk, and I've done my homework, read the models, and the truth is they vary greatly in the amount of output. They could be up 2 degrees in a decade or two, up 20 degrees. It varies widely. So that they don't know specifically doesn't mean that it's not a problem. It is definitely a problem. There's an opportunity here for a grand compromise where we can do both. We can do both domestic production and fully invest in solar energy, wind energy. I specifically support the T. Boone Pickens plan to build windmills to displace natural gas for transportation use. What I would point out is that it is a compromise that has to be made, that you have to allow some drilling in the OCS, in the outer continental shelf, in exchange for fully supporting these. And what I would further assert is that it's important that we do this through the lens of economics and science, not through special interest money. Special interest money is what brings us the idea of doubling the amount of corn ethanol we're burning now. And frankly, it's making a small contribution at best.
Thank you. Ashwin?
Thank you. Oil prices are too high. It's hurting everybody in this economy. It's hurting the middle class. I've talked to people all over the district that are struggling every week to figure out how they're going to pay $4 a gallon for gasoline just to get to and from work, get their kids around town. And it's hurting all sectors of the economy. It's hurting small businesses. These commodity costs are hurting small businesses. They're hurting large corporations. It's harder to transport goods. It's affecting our entire economy, and we need to act on it. Over the past several years, we've had a 3-part energy policy in this country. And it's been buy more foreign oil, buy more foreign oil, and buy more foreign oil. We can do better than that. We need to change. That's why I support a new direction for our energy policy in this country, a comprehensive energy plan that includes everything, that includes wind and solar and cellulose-based biofuels and energy-efficient appliances, energy-efficient cars, geothermal. There is so much opportunity here for our country. We'd be fools not to jump on this economic chance. And the bottom line is either we make the technology here now and we sell it to the rest of the world, or we wait 10 years and they'll make it over there and we can buy it from them. We need to act. Here's 3 specific things the federal government can do. First, unleash the private sector on this problem. Give the private sector tax incentives and tax rebates and tax credits to both consumers and to businesses for investing in this technology. Second, unleash American innovation on this. Invest in research and development with the most innovative people on the face of the planet. And third, sure, responsible drilling. When we can increase domestic supply on a short-term basis in a responsible way, let's do it. But ultimately, what I want you to know is we can't just drill our way out of this problem. We're going to have to think our way out of this problem. The good news is we as Americans have been thinking our way out of problems for a really long time. It's what we do. It's in our DNA. So let's do it. Let's change directions and get a comprehensive energy policy in this country.
Well, energy policy is another example of how Congress is broken. For over 25 years, we have lacked an energy policy in this country. And we continue to send money to countries overseas and thugs around the world that don't like us. That is a tremendous irresponsibility for our economy and for the future national security of this country. The truth is also that we can't fill the energy needs we have today, right now, without looking at expansion on a variety of fronts. There's no magic silver bullet. It has to be a comprehensive and balanced approach. We absolutely need to look to the future of solar and wind and biothermal and new types of cellulose ethanol that's going to move away from food-based oriented ethanol. That's the direction we need to move. And nuclear energy in particular is going to provide a lot of opportunity to take away greenhouse gases, and that's going to help the environment down the road. If the French can do it with up to 78% of their electricity, there's no reason why the United States can't do it. Unfortunately, we haven't worked on a nuclear power plant or don't have any nuclear scientists coming up through the pipeline because we haven't looked at this area in over 30 years. We also need to make sure that we have a significant supply of energy right now domestically. I believe we do need to look at opening the outer continental shelf. I'm with the majority of Americans on this issue. I'm with the majority of Minnesota families and Minnesota 3rd District residents on this issue. I'm where Jim Ramstad is on this issue. We can do so responsibly, environmentally safely. We'd be fools not to, because right now 85% of our oil is off limits in the outer continental shelf. We need to bridge that short-term gap. The long term is the innovation and the future for research and development, for green jobs in the future, and we can absolutely do that. But it would be a tremendous mistake to treat our natural resources as an environmental hazard, because every other country in the world uses their natural resources. We need to do the same and do so responsibly environmentally to get us ready for the long term, for the next stage of innovation and job creation.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to move on to Ashwin. We'll start out with you, followed by Erik, and then David. The topic is workers' rights and union voting. Last year, Congress considered legislation called the Employee Free Choice Act. It has been reported that the proposed bill would radically change how unions seek to be certified as the bargaining agents for workers and would replace the principle of secret ballot elections. The business community has expressed concerns that such a card check system would be open to types of pressures and intimidation. What is your position on this legislation?
I support it, but we need to make sure that there's no intimidation on either side, and that means we need to make sure that unions aren't intimidating the workers into voting for anything either. Ultimately, workers ought to have their own choice, and if we want to do this right, we need to make sure there's no intimidation on either side. Ultimately, though, I don't think that the problem with our economy is workers or working families. I think the problem over the past several years is that we've been in the grips of a failed economic policy in this country. And that failed economic policy has emphasized massive and reckless tax cuts, massive deficit spending, and massive debt. What that has done is it's devalued our currency in this country. And now we are struggling with record deficits and record debt. We just announced a $482 billion deficit, the most ever reported in the history of the world. So what I say, to get this economy back on track, we're focusing on the wrong thing. I believe that we need a new direction for our economic policy, and that means balancing our federal budget. First and foremost, it is so important. Let's balance this federal budget and pay down this debt. If we do that, we'll strengthen our currency and we won't pass on this crippling debt to future generations. Second, invest in our people. That means investing from early childhood education through lifelong education in this country. And I know that other people say that they're for it, but Erik, you voted for the largest cuts in education in Minnesota history. And third, it means developing a comprehensive energy strategy in this country that includes all forms and creates win-win-win scenarios whereby we can bring gas prices down, push our economy forward, improve our security situation. And by the way, if we do it right, we might even save the planet at the exact same time. It is a win-win-win. We just need the courage to change.
Thank you, David.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Well, you got asked about a proposal to have union elections without the benefit of a vote being secret and private, and ended up talking about your support for it and then the deficit and debt and energy. I think this is a great example of special interest money at work in politics. There's no question that there's a strong union contribution in politics in terms of money. I've experienced this firsthand. The idea of people voting in public is un-American, it's unconscionable. If you want a union, you have every right to vote for one. And you ought to be able to go vote in private and with your own conscience decide whether you would like to be represented by the union or not. What this is a proposal to do is to take away that right and say to people, vote as you wish, and the union brothers will stand here with you and watch. And you say we should make sure that there isn't intimidation. Well, there will be. Now, as to the deficit, I've taken a pledge in this race, and I've said if I vote for deficit spending, I'm willing to resign my office and come home. And I'm going to challenge right now both my other opponents to take the same pledge.
Erik, I'm sorry I missed you there, so.
Okay.
We knew.
Well,
Just want to shake things up a little
all
bit.
right, good. Going back to the card check question, the so-called Employee Free Choice Act, I think it's important to point out that the business community does not just have concerns about this proposal. They are adamantly opposed to it because it will fundamentally shift the balance between labor and management in this country for decades to come. And we have had in Minnesota in particular, we've had a good working relationship between management unions over a long history and a long period of time. Taking away the right to a secret ballot, I mean, that secret ballot is fundamental to American democracy. Even George McGovern, the most liberal candidate in the face and the planet in the history of the United States, is against taking away the secret ballot. And I'm surprised that Ashwin would be to the left of George McGovern. It would be a tremendous catastrophe for our economy, for taking away the rights of voters or of labor union workers, because it can be abused. It can be abused by both sides. That's why George McGovern is against taking that private right of a secret ballot away. And I think we're focusing on the wrong thing here, too. If we want to make sure that we're developing opportunities for the future, you don't move in the direction of giving labor unions more special influence and more special rights so they can funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars into campaigns like they are with my opponent. That's the wrong direction to go, absolutely. And unions have every right to participate in the political process, just like corporations and everyone else does. But you can't have it both ways.
May I respond?
Ashwin, you may have a minute.
Erik, I'm glad to hear of your newfound respect for George McGovern. I want to say I think some people are misreading this bill, and there's been sort of a campaign to talk about it. Look, this isn't taking away the right to secret ballot to anybody. The first thing I said is we need to make sure there's no intimidation on either side. What the bill says is that if 30% of the people want a secret ballot, they get a secret ballot. Otherwise, I mean, anyone that has independently looked at this issue, including WCCO and various other news organizations, have said that that ad campaign is just false. So I don't know why we keep repeating it and hoping that people believe it, because it's just not true. And ultimately, what I'd say is that what you're seeing is a real difference, a difference in the view, a different view of the world. Some people think that working families are the problem right now with our economy, and some people think the middle class are the problem. And they're criticizing me. All right, I'm getting the stop sign. We'll talk a little bit later about it.
All right, thank you. It's good to see you're so reactive to the stop sign.
Right.
That's great.
Well, I got enough people around here.
Okay, our
Just
next.
1 minute.
Yes.
No one thinks working families are the problem. No one thinks the middle class is the problem. Ashwin's quite right. The bill makes an allowance. If you can get enough people to vote for it, you can still have a secret ballot. What Erik and I are both saying is that a secret ballot's an American right. It's simple fairness.
Thank you. The next question we're going to move on to is taxes, and I'm going to get us back on the right order here. So we'll start this out with Erik, then David, and Ashwin. In 2001 and 2003, Congress passed major tax reforms that included significant individual and income tax rate reductions, lower taxes for married couples, increased child credits, increased retirement plan limits, phase down and repeal of the estate tax, expansion of Section 179 small business asset expensing, and temporary reductions in the taxes on dividends and capital gains. However, many of these provisions expire at the end of 2010, and if not extended, will result in a tax increase on many American taxpayers. What is your position on extending these provisions? Erik, we'll start with you.
I absolutely support extending all of the tax cuts that were put forward in 2001 to 2003. It is no doubt that it has brought in a significant more amount of revenue into our coffers at the federal level. Ashwin's wrong earlier when he talked about reckless tax cuts. We need tax cuts that are going to keep this jobs economy humming. Right now, we got to get our economy back on track. This is a significant issue because Congress has tried to pass the largest tax increase over the last 8 months twice. Largest tax increase in U.S. history. We're talking about $1 trillion. If you move that capital out of the marketplace, you're going to have less investment, you're going to have less jobs. You don't raise taxes in a fragile economy. This is going to also affect many third district families in very serious ways. You mentioned the child tax credit that's going to go away, the marriage penalty that's going to be reinstated, as well as the income tax rates that not only affect higher income folks, but affect lower income folks. And many of these folks, it's really easy to demagogue an issue and say you're going to provide tax relief for the wealthy, et cetera. The truth is many small businesses file their taxes under the individual level, as an S corporation, et cetera. If you have higher tax rates, these folks are going to be putting less money and less capital formation into the market. There's going to be less entrepreneurs moving forward. It's part of the problem we have right now in Congress. We need more long-term solutions. Rather than sending an economic stimulus check out to everyone to make them feel good for a few months, we need to extend these tax cuts permanently so workers and investors and employers and employees know what risks they can take accordingly to invest into the future. That's the direction we need to go to make sure we get our economy back on track.
David?
Erik is quite right that this is not a time to raise taxes. It's a bit dispiriting for me to see both presidential candidates at this point with their own tax cut packages, because I don't think it's a time to be cutting taxes either. The debt and the deficit are enormous. Every year we spend more than we take in, that's the deficit. One great pool of money that's available to us to spend federally is the interest on the debt. The time has come to stop deficit spending. The time has come to start paying down the debt. It will pay big dividends. On the table outside, you'll find the tax code. I brought it today. I printed it out. All 6,000 pages of it. That doesn't include the 1,000-page index. When I tied it up like so much recycled newsprint on the floor, I opened it and looked inside, just in the middle. There is no one who knows what all is in that document. I found taxes, trucks, 37,500 pounds or more, not if you carry concrete. And I thought, well, great for the concrete guys. The asphalt guys must be really mad. Flip the next page, not if you use it for camping. High five Winnebago. So there's many individual examples of where taxes are not paid and should be paid. But the idea of more tax cuts on top of where we are now is not needed, nor is this a time to raise taxes.
Thank you, David. Ashwin?
Sure. Well, it's election season, so I guess that means it's time for us to all come to you that's when politicians come to you and they'll tell you how many taxes they're going to cut or how much more money they're going to give in your pocketbook, and we all come to you with our different tax cut plans, and we see who can cut the most. I'm not going to play. I'll let other people do that. I think sometimes leaders tell us not just what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. Right now, we have a $9 trillion debt in this country. We have a deficit of $482 billion, which is the most reported ever in the history of the entire world. Let me tell you why that matters. What that means is that for every person sitting in here right now, and maybe even more importantly, for your kids that aren't here, that's a $30,000 debt that we owe to China. Every single one of us is going to pay it off. So when people come here and they tell you about, well, I'm going to cut taxes, I'm going to give you more and more and more and more, ask them where it's going to come from. Who's going to pay for it? We're going to borrow it from China so we can have tax cuts now so we can get elected? Or are we going to borrow it from our kids so they can figure it out? And they say, well, it pushes the economy forward. Well, here we are. We passed those tax cuts in 2001. Here we are 8 years later. Do you feel like the economy's doing well? Do you feel like you have more money in your pocket? Do you feel like we have pro-growth policies in this country? I think we need a more thoughtful and measured approach. We would work with both sides to create a long-term plan for growth in this country that includes a balanced federal budget and fiscal responsibility, real investments in our people to make sure we have the most competitive workforce on the entire planet, and a comprehensive energy strategy to get off our dependence on oil. What I don't think we need is to borrow $2.1 trillion more from China and just add that to our debt.
Erik?
I just want to be clear, because I think, as David had mentioned too, we are not up here advocating and I think asking for more tax cuts. But these are the question was very directly talking about tax cuts that are set to expire. I mean, Ashwin didn't answer the question, but in the past he has been very clear about not letting those tax cuts, about allowing those tax cuts to expire. That would be a tremendous harm. That would produce tremendous harm in our small business community, on tax-paying families throughout the 3rd District, on an average of about $2,600 per household in lost income by the year 2012. That's a significant amount of money because of the marriage penalty, the child tax credit, tax rates, without a doubt. The problem with Congress is they spend too much. They don't live within their means. When I was the majority leader in the State House, we balanced a $4.5 billion budget deficit without raising taxes. We had to make some tough decisions, without a doubt, but we didn't ship jobs out of the state because we made the right decisions and got our economy back on track. That's the type of strength we need in Congress today.
May I respond?
Yes, Ashwin.
Okay.
1 minute.
Absolutely. Of course, I support extending the tax cuts for 98% of earners in this country. Of course, I support extending the tax cuts for small businesses. The only point that I'm making is we need to be thoughtful and measured about this. This discussion has to go beyond, are you going to let them expire or aren't you? We need pro-growth economic policies in this country, and that's a more thoughtful and more measured approach. We talk about, raising taxes, who hasn't raised taxes. It's a question of priorities. It's true that they balanced the budget, but they voted for the largest education cuts in Minnesota's history. It's a question of priorities and how you balance the budget. One issue that we disagree on is I'd start by balancing the budget by taking away the tax breaks we give oil companies right now. I'd start by closing the offshore loopholes that we have. And I'm not sure Erik supports it because I know his campaign is being funded by these same corporations that enjoy those loopholes. So ultimately, you have to ask yourself whose priorities are where and who will prioritize pro-growth economic policies in a thoughtful and measured way in this country.
Thank you. Our next question we're going to move on is the topic of education. The TwinWest's business community believes that improving the performance of the pre-K through 12 education system in the United States is necessary to provide a strong foundation for both U.S. competitiveness and for individuals to succeed in our rapidly changing world. What changes would you suggest be made to our pre-K through 12 education system, and what role does or should the federal government play to ensure success for future generations and the competitiveness of our nation and its workforce? David, we'll start that question with you.
So all three of us will stand here or sit here and say how important education is, and we're all right when we say that. It is how our country will succeed economically in the future. There's no doubt about it. We are not going to be the lowest cost workforce in the world. We're going to have to be the most innovative, the smartest, the best. The education department in Washington's an interesting organization. They keep more than $1 billion a year inside their department for themselves. And what I question is whether or not they're bringing a great deal. We should fund, let me stop and say, we should fund more than we do. We should make it a bigger priority. But I question, when we have people at the University of Minnesota who study and wonder, how do we teach teachers? And look at this question of teaching. And yet in Washington, D.C., there are thousands of bureaucrats that retain more than $1 billion worth of the total fund for themselves. So yes, it's a priority. Yes, we should increase the funding. But I think we have to question the federal government's role. Do they really contribute to the education of students in Minnesota? Do they really help the teachers in Minnesota understand how to do a classroom lesson better? I don't think so. I think this is an example in which the federal government's main role is funding, and they should stick to that.
Ashwin?
Yes, thank you. You've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. I think that we need to start changing the way that we think about education in this country. I think the previous way of thinking, the old way of thinking, is that education is just a social service like anything else. I don't believe that. I think that it is directly tied to our economy, and we must view education as an investment in our economy. The world has changed now. With the pace that goods and communications travel, we're not just competing with people across our country, we're competing with people in China and in Europe and all over the world. And we must make sure we have the most educated and competitive workforce in the entire world. That starts at early childhood education. It continues through K through 12 education. Now, to the specific question on K through 12 education, I think that we should either fund No Child Left Behind or get rid of it. That is, it was a good idea, and if it was funded properly, to give schools and teachers and administrators the resources they need to do their jobs. But then we need to put our money where our mouth is. And this is an area of disagreement between at least Erik and I. I know that he voted for the largest education cuts in Minnesota's history. And what that does then is it pushes down onto the local governments. More and more things to do and less money to do it with, and then the balloon of property taxes go up. So then the state government can say, well, we cut taxes or we kept taxes low, but then everybody's property taxes go up, and there's no more money in anyone's pocket, and the kids aren't getting as good of an education. The same thing with the federal government. I don't think the federal government ought to be pushing more and more things to do on the states and give them less and less resources to do it with. Let's view education as an investment in our economy, as an investment in our people, and as an investment in our future. And if we do that, and if we put our money where our mouth is, we're going to have the most competitive workforce in the entire world for generations to come, and America's economy will continue to lead the world.
Thank you, Erik.
Well, first of all, I want to clear the record because as a member of the House majority, when we came into power in 1998, we put more money into K-12 education in the Republican majority in the House than the previous 6 years of the Democratic legislature did combined. That was a tremendous benefit to suburban districts throughout this district as well, in the 3rd district. As the majority leader, I made it a priority to make sure that our suburban school districts were funded better and they had the opportunities to raise money at their local levels, which all of our school districts wanted in a tremendous way. In fact, I received an award as the majority leader in these tough years that Ashwin's talking about for being a friend of public education. Now, there aren't many Republicans who may get that award, but I got that award and I'm proud of it. It's hanging in my office. Having said that, I think there are absolutely changes we need to do to change our education structure so we teach in different ways. We need to look at online learning. We need to take advantage of new technologies because we're going to be delivering education in different ways in the future. We can't follow the same traditional old models or we're going to get left behind other countries throughout the world. In No Child Left Behind, we absolutely don't need a national school board. We need to make sure that we remove mandates. I'm for moving it more of in a direction where we're successful in welfare reform. Give block grants to the states. Let the states handle their own pots of money in different ways. They can be the incubators. They can be the innovators. That's where we're going to see success. The federal government's role in education needs to be changed. I'm all for funding basic research. That's how we're going to get the Medtronics of the world. That's how we're going to get the new developing technologies throughout this country to create new jobs. But I have to tell you, as a legislator, as a candidate for Congress, and as a parent of 4 children, Ashwin's completely wrong. I care about this stuff, and I've got a record supporting it.
Our next question is on the issue of transportation, and Ashwin, we will start with you on this question. The tragic collapse of the 35W bridge a year ago brought national attention to the fact that the U.S. transportation system infrastructure is in disrepair. This decaying system costs our country billions of dollars every year. In the Twin Cities alone, the cost of congestion was estimated to be more than $1 billion in 2005, and let me remind you, that was when gas cost $2.20 a gallon. A strong infrastructure system is vital to supporting our economy. What should the federal government's role be to improve the safe, efficient, sustainable movement of goods and people throughout the country?
Thank you for the question. It's all tied together, though, isn't it? Transportation and energy and the environment and our economy. It's all part of one cycle. I believe that we need part of the answer on investing in transportation is going to mean investing in our energy plan, finding a new way of doing energy in this country, a comprehensive energy strategy to get off this dependence on foreign oil and invest in all kinds of different ways of using energy in this country. Now, when it comes specifically to transportation, one thing I think the federal government can do is help us finish the 610 corridor. Target has been waiting a long time to come in with about 25,000 jobs, and we ought to get that done. Second, I think we ought to invest in the light rail system from Minneapolis out to the western suburbs. The federal government's already helping us out. I think they could do more. We could get it done faster. And if we do it right, again, it is a win-win-win. We will bring the price of gas down. we will improve our economy and increase productivity, because instead of waiting in traffic for an hour every morning, people will be typing on their emails. Third, we'll improve our security situation, because we won't be as dependent on foreign oil. And fourth, we might save the planet at the exact same time. We might take some steps to aggressively address global climate change. I think it is a win-win-win. We just need the courage to change. Now, when it comes to the 35W collapse, I think it's an important issue, and it's important that we talk about it. People on both sides of the aisle joined in the Minnesota State Legislature to get the funding we needed to fund the repair of the 35W bridge. Erik voted against it, and he also was part of the Republican leadership that kicked out members of the Republican caucus who worked across party lines in order to get something done for Minnesotans. And I don't think Jim Ramstad would have done that. I think Jim Ramstad is someone that is known for working across party lines, and I think that's the kind of leader we need in Washington. Someone not that punishes people from their own party for working across party lines, but rewards them, and that's what I want to try to be.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that we need to fundamentally reform how we fund transportation. As driving continues to go down, we've got a system right now that is going to continue to wane and going to continue to strain. We are relying on a system that unfortunately is it's only on gas tax money primarily. That is a tremendous mistake, because people are going to continue to drive less as energy costs go up, as new technologies come online. We have to make some changes. We have to fundamentally come together on a bipartisan, comprehensive basis to make changes in a different direction. Part of the problem is right now every penny of gas tax that you have that goes to the federal government gets split into 74 different pots of money. I'm not convinced Congress can spend the money any much more wisely. And earmarks are absolutely a problem. Projects like 610 or Highway 212 are absolutely critical projects that can go through a meritorious project and need to come online. But I tell you, Congress is wrong when they fund the Woodstock Museum with transportation dollars and the earmark goes in that direction. That's the change we need to make in Congress. You know, the reason I voted against a transportation bill that had the largest tax increase, one of the largest tax increases in Minnesota history, sales taxes that were applied inappropriately throughout the 3rd District on our bordering county level, as well as an unfair tax on the gas tax, because Hennepin County is the most populated county in the state. We're 87th in the amount of money we get kicked back out of that gas tax. Under the new bill that passed, guess where we end up? 87th. That's the wrong direction. We got to look to the future and change formulas. And I tell you, to listen to Ashwin tell me that I was part of a caucus that kicked out my members, I was very direct and open. As the majority leader, I never would have handled the situation in the way that our leadership handled that situation with those folks that decided to vote their conscience and vote with their districts. That's absolutely appropriate. And that's why Jim Ramstad understands the same mode of operation that I do. He's supporting me in this campaign without a doubt. We need to bring people together. You don't kick people out of the party or out of your caucus for one vote. That's absolutely the wrong direction to go, and I never would have done that, and I've said so publicly.
Thank you. Let's have David first answer the question.
Have to wait. I get to do it first. So we're all going to sit up here and tell you how important transportation is. Of course it is. I've heard earmarks talked about twice now. I've pledged never to do an earmark, and if so, I'll resign my office and come home. It is one of the most corrupt practices in Congress today. I was at the Highway 55 corridor meeting last week, the only one of us, and we talked about transportation policy and how should it be funded. Should there be a meritorious process where all across the country projects are compared and decisions are made on which ones to fund, or should it be on the basis of political power? Ashwin makes a good point about how political power works with party politics, and I'm glad to hear that you didn't support having some of your fellow members excommunicated for having the temerity to vote with the business lobby on a transportation bill. But the truth is, that's not a Republican phenomenon. That's a party politics phenomenon. That's how it works. You toe the line. These people came in with their millions of dollars. They get you elected. And if you don't toe the line, this is what happens. And it's hurt transportation policy, and it's part of why Congress has a 9% approval rating. People aren't knowledgeable about the specifics, but I think they're emotionally smart, and they know when they've been had. And they've been had. They know about the bridges to nowhere. They know about the Woodstock Museum. And so I'm going to challenge again both of my opponents to pledge never to do earmark spending.
Ashwin, did you want to respond?
Yeah, please.
1 minute.
Okay. Briefly, I'm Thank you, David, for acknowledging. The Chamber of Commerce supported the transportation bill, and they supported the 5-cent gas tax increase. This was a chamber-supported bill. And I think it's good because it sort of illustrates the point that we've been sort of hinting at here all day, is that we need to be more thoughtful as we go forward. It's not just, the debate has shifted. It's not just higher taxes or lower taxes anymore. It's what's an investment. The Chamber recognized that we need to have solid bridges and solid transportation to move our goods, people, and services across our community. And what the Chamber decided was that a 5-cent gas tax was worth it. Unfortunately, Erik and other members of his caucus disagreed, but I appreciate the thinking on that. In terms of the earmark spending, I'd say the same thing. Of course, I'm not going to vote for pork, but when it comes to real investments in our people, of course I would support those things. I don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. I think if we balance our budget, invest in our people, so we have the most competitive workforce on the entire planet, and create a comprehensive energy strategy, we can get this economy moving again.
Thank you. We're going to have our last question here.
May I rebut?
Yes, 1 minute. That may have been our last question. Go ahead.
The Congress's most important project is to run the purse. If they hand the money, here's $27 billion, here's another billion for you, here's the package of money, and then we're going to come back and we're going to ask, what did you do with it? Was it spent well? Show us the projects. That's an effective way to oversee the spending. What Ashwin just dodged is the idea of, but could Congress step out of that oversight role and do their own pet projects? And it's a corrupt practice. If you do that, that's how you end up with something that's good for somebody's district, but it turns out that it's a bridge to nowhere. I'm going to ask again, since you both have said you're not in favor of earmarks, if you would take the pledge to not do it.
Let me move. I'm actually going to move on to our last question.
Okay.
All right,
do it
so
right
you guys
now.
can. I do want to get, the last question is actually something that's very important to the business community. So in all seriousness, I want to be sure we have time for this. In Minnesota, the baby boomer population is highly educated, with over 45% of them having at least a college education. As more of this generation nears retirement, there will be an increased need for highly skilled and educated workers to replace them. It is estimated that the Twin Cities alone will lose over 350,000 highly skilled workers to retirement in the coming years. Currently, we are nowhere on track to replace these individuals with equally qualified workers. So my question to you is, what ideas do you have to ensure that we have the workforce that we need to compete in this global economy? And that question, Erik, we're going to start with you.
As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I sponsored in the state legislature, having been to India and to China several times over the last year, I saw firsthand about how we are going to be, as a country, as a state, and as a district, up against some serious competition educationally. I came back with the thought that we need lifelong learning accounts. We need to have an opportunity for folks to set aside money on a tax-free basis. They can invest money because as they go through job transition and job changes, that they have opportunities for the shifting economy. Absolutely, we need to move in that direction. That's one thing I would do. Secondly, our workforce needs to be educated in different ways, and I think part of it is educating our younger people in different ways, whether it's providing opportunities for Mandarin Chinese, thinking to the future, whether it's having an India Center at the University of Minnesota, whether it's thinking globally, as I think the 3rd District is all about with our good companies and corporate citizens, the small business community. So I absolutely believe that education is a key component. We can invest in those areas, but we're going to need to do so in different ways for the long term. That means doing more, using more technologies like online learning, making sure that we're not just funding people in the teaching opportunities in teachers. We need to fund them well, but don't just fund them because they work in the environment for one more year based on seniority. Nobody in General Mills or in the real world gets paid more just because they work at a certain job for one more year. It should be based more on merit. And so we need to change our educational opportunities to look to the future. That's where we're going to see more innovation. We're going to see more opportunities to really compete against countries like China and India down the road.
Thank you. David?
Well, again, we're talking about how important education is, and it is. And what we have to ask the folks on the right to do is to invest more, to spend more. And what we have to ask the folks on the left to do is to unleash the creativity that's out there, to not pass it through the filter of, we'll do any innovation just so long as it's okay with the teachers union. And we have to push it down more to a state level with greater federal funding. Erik's quite right about lifelong learning accounts. It is about lifelong learning. Today, if you're in the workforce and can't participate in statistical process control, if you can't participate in modern quality efforts, you can't participate. The economy is becoming more and more sophisticated. We're competing globally. There's no question that we need it. There's no question that it has been underfunded in the past. There's also no question that it's been hobbled by bureaucracy in the past. So both things are needed.
Thank you. Ashwin?
You know, my parents came to this country. They had $19 between them when they first got to this country from India. And the one thing that they did have when they came here was a good education. And it was as a result of that education that they were able to live their dreams in this country. And they very heavily emphasized education on me as I was growing up. I still have memories of my mom asking my teachers for more homework from me when I was a kid, so she could give me extra stuff to do at night and in the summertime. And I really didn't like it at the time, but looking back, it was the greatest gift she could have given me because it opened all kinds of doors to me. And I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities I've had if we hadn't emphasized education. I think we need that same emphasis and investment on education at the federal level. One of the problems, I think, with our education system right now is that we're producing too many lawyers like me and not enough scientists and engineers. We're going to need scientists, engineers, and mathematicians to compete in this global economy as you're talking about. So here's specifically what I think we can do about it. First, let's make college more affordable. That means increasing stopping the cuts we've been having in Pell Grants and in Stafford loans. College is very, very expensive right now, and cost should never be the reason why a smart kid decides not to go to college. Second, create new scholarships, grants, and loans for promising young students who choose to pursue studies or careers in science, engineering, or math. We must increase our production of them here domestically because it's scientists and engineers who innovate, and innovation is what America does best and will be the key to us competing on this global economy. So those would be two specific steps to ensure that we have the workforce that we need in the coming years and decades. One, make college more affordable, and two, create new incentives for people to pursue studies and careers in science, math, and engineering.
Thank you. That concludes the question portion of the debate, and so what we will move to now is giving each of the candidates the opportunity for a 3-minute closing statement. And Erik, we're going to start that with you, and then we'll go to David, followed by Ashwin.
Well, good. Well, first I want to thank the TwinWest's Chamber, of course, for hosting this debate this morning, and also for General Mills. You know, my father-in-law worked his entire career at General Mills, and you are just another example of a great corporate citizen that we have here in the state of Minnesota. You know, in the legislature, I have worked hard and fought hard to make Minnesota a business-friendly state. I remember my grandfather owning a small business manufacturing company out in Plymouth. He was always being lured to South Dakota. That's one of the prime reasons I ran for the legislature for the first time, was to improve our business climate. And then it was about competing against North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Today, we're competing against China and India and the rest of the world in a hyper-competitive global market. If we're going to compete successfully, though, Congress is going to need to act and is going to need to look at forward-thinking leadership. So we're jump-starting our stagnant economy. That means we have to have an economy that's centered around new energy opportunities, domestic opportunities for exploration. We need to make sure we have an educated workforce down the road. We need to make sure we're formulating and addressing healthcare costs that are affecting small businesses and families throughout the 3rd District. And we need the right tax code. We need the right tax code that's going to increase and enhance the high-quality jobs of the future. That's a big difference between me and Mr. Madia as we laid out. I am for extending those tax cuts. That is critical because it's going to impact families and small businesses in a very negative way if we don't allow them to go forward. You know, the 3rd District actually is made up of a very vibrant small business community. We don't need to give them more tax burdens, particularly on those small business providers. We need, more than anything, to look at the examples of Jim Ramstad, of Bill Frenzel, folks who have been very involved in my race and campaign. Jim Ramstad's the chair of my campaign. Working for him, I learned one important lesson that I've always carried with me: the importance of civility in politics and being results-oriented. It's much like the business community is, being results-oriented. We need that in Congress. We need to restructure the practice in Washington right now to eliminate partisan fighting and now get more in the habit of cooperating and rebuilding for our future. We need to make the next year in Congress a leadership year. We need to make the next year a leadership year, not just a legislative year. That's what we need. I'm running for Congress because we need more forward-thinking leaders in Congress with energy and enthusiasm to embrace new ideas for the future. We can get our fiscal house in order, we can remove ourselves off the dependency of foreign oil, and we can address rising healthcare costs and grow our economy if we do it in the right way. I'm proud to have had the support of the business community in all of my legislative races, despite some differences we may have had on some issues. And I'm proud to have their support moving forward in this race for Congress. There's no doubt these are challenging times, but America is the best and the most prosperous and the most wonderful country in this world. And I know with the right leadership, we will continue to make Minnesota and the 3rd District a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. Thank you for having us here this morning.
Thank you, Erik. David?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to us. And I want to thank both my opponents for a discourse that was honorable and respectful. In many cases, I find that I agree. I want to agree right now with one thing that was just said, was that Congress needs to act. What I have to ask you is, do you think they will? Do you think they will do something about Social Security? Do you think they will address health care? I know we've been talking about energy since the 70s. Do you think they will now act? What I'm trying to point out is that partisan politics, from professional politicians, from people who'd like to be a professional politician, is part of the problem. It's a 2-year election cycle. It's not long between now and when the next election comes up, and there's special interest money at play. I'm the one candidate in this race who's declining to take special interest money. And it's an expensive decision to do that in politics. And yet, I believe that that frees me to be in a position that no one else can as in this race. As an independent, I would be in a position to speak truth to power, to take ideas from both sides of the aisle, to argue to the right that the left has a good idea in universality in health care, to argue to the left that we have to take costs out of the system. That includes taking regulation out of the system. I believe that I would be in the best position to make these arguments. And if you consider this, if you're willing to send an independent to Congress, the country will take notice. And I will tell you one other thing. If you will lead, the professional politicians will follow. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you all very much again for being here this morning. I've enjoyed this discussion very much. One thing that I didn't mention through the course of this debate, I'm a former Republican. I was a Republican my entire life up until about 5 or 6 years ago. And I got beat up a little bit for it as I was going through the Democratic nomination process. But I wanted to tell you now, the reason I left the Republican Party was because I thought that the fiscally irresponsible policies that they were promoting just didn't work. I said, when did the Republican Party become a party that couldn't balance a budget? When did the Republican Party become a party that had irresponsible foreign policy that would put us into wars that we didn't need to fight against enemies that we didn't need to have? And so I left. In the end, though, I'm a moderate Democrat. I'm a moderate pro-business Democrat. I'm fiscally conservative and I'm socially moderate. Of course I want taxes to be low. Of course I want to balance the budget. And I want to keep government out of people's personal lives. Ultimately, elections are about choices. And you have a very clear choice before you here today. We can continue. Some people think that the way to get our economy moving again is to do more of the same. That is, more tax cuts, more deficit spending, and more debt. Let's keep going, and someone else will take care of the debt later on. Maybe it'll be our kids, maybe it'll be our grandkids, but someone will figure it out. I disagree. I think we can do better, and I think we need a new direction for our economy. And you've heard that new direction here today. Balance our federal budget, invest in our people, and create a comprehensive energy strategy to get off this dependence on foreign oil. I feel though if we do these things, we will chart a new direction for our economy, and these are pro-growth policies that will help everybody in our community. Small businesses especially are being hurt by these commodity prices. I think these policies will help. Now, it's true that I'm not giving you short-term fixes here. These are midterm to long-term solutions, and it's also true that I'm asking for a little bit of sacrifice from everybody. I know politicians aren't supposed to do it, but I think we need to. I think that if we want to get our nation back on track again, it's going to take all of us as Americans coming together again to solve these problems and to right our nation's course. The good news is we've been doing it for generations. When we've come together before as a nation, we've stormed beaches and liberated continents. We put someone on the moon. We've mapped the human genome. We've even led the world in conquering a global environmental crisis before with a hole in the ozone layer. It is inside of us to do this. It's in our DNA to come together as Americans to be a part of the solution. I think we have an opportunity to do great things here and to get our great nation back on track again. I'd be honored to have your support in this effort. Thank you very much.
Nicely done. Thanks, Erik.
I would want to thank each candidate for their comments this morning, for sharing their valuable time to educate the business community and the voters of the 3rd District on these very important issues.